Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Indexer Office Hours. Today is the 3rd of September and this is Indexer Office Hours 173. For anyone who's new to Indexer Office Hours, this is the town square where graph ecosystem participants come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexers. This is a conversation and we love participation, as I always like to say, and you're more than welcome to get involved in today's conversation via voice or via the text box. And if you're having any challenges with your microphone, let me know and I will try and get that sorted for you. Just as a reminder, this is a call that is going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you are concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. So I will give a shout out to the latest 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧𝗧 episode. And that is episode 184 with Max. Oh geez, I'm every time I do this, I always mess people's surnames up. Gruffer, I think is how you pronounce it. Maybe I'm just gonna for now on. I'm just gonna say their first name. I'm not culpable and don't mess up people's surnames. But Max is the head of research at 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗳𝗂𝗧𝗏𝗂𝗋 Ventures. It's obviously a VC firm, and they focus on Web3. He's a very diverse background, built various different things in the past. Talks a little bit about his experience, starting his entrepreneurial experience in high school, like his spirit. Starting various side businesses. He got into esports hosting and operating Minecraft servers, and of course talks about crypto, the future of Web3, how that intersects with AI, and of course how the graph plays a role in that future. So if you'd like to check out the episode, go ahead and do so in the chat with the link there. Thanks for posting the agenda and the episode 1. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anna for our regularly scheduled Repo Watch.
Thank you, Abel, and hello, everyone. Okay, so today on Repo Watch, starting with execution layer clients, we have had a new release for Firehose Ethereum. This is just a very small release that bumps substreams and Firehose core, and the version is 2.7.1. Then we have a new release on Arbitrum Nitro, which is version 3.1.2, and this is something we are currently running in our testnet without any issues. But what you need to know about this is that it fixes a crash issue from 3.1.1 for chains imported from Arbitrum Classic. So it would only apply to mainnets, actually. And it also introduces default endpoint flags that must be replicated if overridden. And then on the consensus layer client, we just have a new Nimbus release. So this is version 24.8.0, which is a low urgency release that focuses on performance improvements, which include a 25% speed increase in processing blocks with deposit, and also includes some fixes for adding timeouts to failed execution layers. Quickly checking the chat. And then on GraphStack, we have no new releases, and this week is Launchpad Stack update. So here we have a couple of new stable Launchpad charts, so ProxyD and Arbitrum Nitro, and also new stable versions for namespaces Ethereum, Gnosis, Polygon, Arbitrum, 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧𝗏𝗂𝗧, monitoring namespace, Postgres, Operator, and Ingress. All right, that's all I had. It was a short one today, so over to you, Juan.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, getting into Protocol Watch. Again, we don't have a ton to cover, but so I'll be brief. First of all, in forum governance, we have a small update to chain integrations tracking doc. We have a section called CIP Watch. I don't know if we're gonna be mentioning it there, but some of those changes include, all of the updates to all of the new chains that are beginning the integration, those that are close to being integrated, as well as Those are scheduled for Q4, like StarkNet, IOTX, and others. If you're interested in any of those updates, the link is in the agenda. And maybe, I don't know, Abel, if we covered, CIP Watch live on this call, but it is in the agenda anyways. Forum research, we don't have any new updates since last IOH. For the contracts repository, there are a few PRs that have been updated, mainly regarding Horizon, so the subgraph service unit testing, some refactor to the unit tests for staking, as well as a fix from one of the latest rounds of audits to make the Fisherman deposit a fixed value. And that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. So I'm gonna be handing over to, not entirely sure if Paka is here. I don't think so. So Abel now.
Firmly grasp it.
Just a quick one. CIP. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Not for today, but appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. You cut out for me there. I'm assuming it's just my side. Let me know, folks, if everything was good on the Repo Watch and the Protocol Watch section. If you heard that, good. I'm assuming you did. I think it's just my side that seems to be choppy, but if so, we'll rock and roll. Just waiting for people to respond in the chat on that. And in the meantime, we'll circle back to Josh's question. So while waiting, questions for people who are better at GraphQL queries than myself. Anyone know how to know a query to run that makes QM code as input and returns recent unallocations?
I'm gonna assume, Josh, you want to basically get the recent allocation clauses for a given subgraph, right? Or a given subgraph deployment, right?
Exactly.
I think, I don't remember. I think we have a closed at field, so you could see if it's recent compared to the current epoch or the current. Yeah, exactly. We have a few closed at fields. I think closed at block, maybe also closed at transaction and closed at block height or something along those lines. So those could be used, and I would assume you can just basically search for the subgraph deployment that you want and look at all of the allocations and basically order them by the closed at block. That should be good enough. I'll craft a small example query for you now.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm assuming. Oh man, it's really bad. It's really choppy on my side. But it seems like it's working. Everything's fine on on everyone else's side, so it might be my issue. Okay. In any case, we move on to the open discussion section. And today we have a continuation from last week's conversation. So we had the good fortune of having John from EdgeNode joining us to enlighten us on everything that is Postgres with his DBA experience. And as you guys remember, we couldn't quite finish all of the questions, so we're going to bring it back and finish off those questions. And of course, as the conversation goes, please do ask questions. And yeah, we're here as a resource to help you guys. So, or specifically John in this case. So yeah, fire away with the questions. John, without further ado, feel free to come on stage and let's get the show on the road.
All right, cool. Thanks, Abel. So everybody can hear me except for Abel, right? All right, let's see here.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Sharing my window here. Okay. Well, right where we left off last time. So we're just going to roll right into this. I have not touched this since we last spoke. My apologies. So hopefully my notes here will be enough to keep us moving here. Okay. How should we approach index design for optimal performance? Is there a basic practice to step through? Kind of. It's you're going to dial this in as you gain more experience with it. But I think that at kind of like the basic intro level, and to be honest, this is kind of the steps that I tend to go through, is, okay, the first thing I want to do is just run that query through explain analyze. I want to see the output from that, see what it did. I think we had talked last time about one of the free tools out there, explain.depez.com. And that'll help you if you paste the output of your explain analyze into it. It'll give you some insight into what it did. And I think there's some other tools too. I can't remember if Derek might have shared one in a previous talk. So that's where I start. I just want to see what's happening here. Is it using any of the indexes? Is it not? That kind of a thing. And I'll work my way out from what's slowest. What is the most expensive part of the query according to this output? So then, now it starts to become a little bit of an art form. At first, it's just, hey, let's slap an index on it. Just plain old B tree. Usually, it's like, okay, it's doing a sequential scan on this column. All right, throw an index on it. Now, where you'll start, a lot of times, hey, that's going to get you somewhere. Now, I've had some instances, and this is where you're kind of learn as you go along. That's why I say it's a little bit of an art, is that, you might understand that, like, well, wait a minute, it's actually querying two columns, or maybe two columns are involved, one within, within the other hierarchically in the way that this thing's working. And you might then slap a composite index on the two columns combined, because that, that initial, like, couple parts of the where clause, or whichever way that the planner saw it, its plan tended to use these two things first to filter everything out. Well, then you might be able to use a composite on those two at the same time and get more bang for your buck. Maybe this is where you start really getting into, like, 201, 301 level. You can learn about partial indexes, because maybe you're only ever querying like the last, X months of data on some particular column. It's a timestamp column. Well, you don't necessarily need to have a massive index on the entire table. We're really, usually the only thing you're ever trying to find is something within the last month or 6 months or whatever. So you can just do a partial index on only the things in that column that fit that criteria. You can do it with things besides timestamps and stuff like that. But so those are things that kind of come later. You might figure out, okay, this type of data, maybe just, or a better type of index for this. But I'm only saying, these things about indexes because at first you probably won't be playing with that kind of stuff. It's just going to be, hey, look, I'm going to throw an index on this table. Now, last thing on indexes, I guess I would say to watch out for, or if something becomes confusing, because this one sometimes throws me for a loop. I throw an index on something and it still refuses to use the index, even though I'm pretty darn sure that this is what it should use. Well, what I found in a recent example is the statistics for the column were set to the default for the entire database. And I think by default, the statistics target is 100. And so I started edging it up, and it took me, I got the statistics set to 1,000 for this particular column. So that means when the vacuum background workers are going to come along and do the statistics on this column, they're going to look at it a lot more closely. They're going to really crank up the detail. And that's expensive, but in this case, it really turned out to be the thing that needed to happen. So by cranking the statistics on just that column up to 1,000, it's not going to be a big overload on the database, but boy, did it take the query time down. It just brought that thing down to, like, under a second, where it had been like 3 minutes. So these are the types of things, and why I say it's a little bit of an art form. So the summary of this step is simply use explain analyze. What are the slowest steps? And just try slapping an index on whichever column you think is you'd like to speed up. Start with that. And lastly, if it does not work, drop it. Don't leave that thing sitting there. A housekeeping thing that predates my arrival, but it's not a bad idea at all, is that at Edge and Node, we put the prefix on here. It means nothing. I mean, you could use 𝗨𝗲𝗂𝗶 _ it doesn't matter, to identify indexes that we have manually added, so that we can kind of key off of that if we want to make sure we're not dropping stuff that we shouldn't be. So that is the arcane art of adding indexes. All right, this one for NVMEs, this one I had to look up and see what the community's saying for this these days. These are the settings that people are putting in their PostgreSQL.coms for NVMEs. I have not personally done anything specific for NVMEs in a long time, but definitely like random page costs. I did use this with plain old, like when SSDs were first becoming a thing, to start dropping down random page costs and sequential page costs. But being specific with NVMEs and what people are doing lately, this is what I can give you as far as digging things up in what the community is doing. Let's see. Moving on. Sharding frameworks. Okay, so this will be fun. All right. So we don't have a specific set of criteria right now. Excuse me. The way things have grown through fast growth and all that kind of thing at Edge and Node, and just the sheer volume has been simply to create a Postgres database, put subgraphs on it, and when that fills up, create another database, and we're calling them shards, of course. And then, so this is what in the database world, you guys may have heard of the idea of like, this is called application sharding. The application knows where to go find the data it's looking for. Which database should it look for? So that's the way we currently operate. What we're looking at now is, all right, are there ways that we could are there better options for us, I guess, lack of a better way of putting it. So what I'm bringing to the party is I would like to evaluate the Citus extension for Postgres. It's been around a long time. So it is a native community extension. The group that developed this was bought out by Microsoft quite some time ago. So they are, they're fully funded, and this is used in like Azure Postgres and stuff like that. So it is not going away, and it is a very dependable extension. But what I find fascinating about it is that since recently, in the last year or so, they came out with, I think it's version 11, and that allowed for schema-based sharding, which would be, I think, a great fit for all of us, because a schema translating in our world to subgraph or subgraph deployment, or I'm not sure of the term right now, but this way we could leverage things that are built into Postgres that I think might even replace some functionality in GraphNode software. That remains to be seen. A long conversation needs to be had with Lutter and that kind of thing to see if that'll work. So that's where we're at. So there's not a lot to share right now other than, hey, this is how we're doing it. We've kind of winged it, and now I want to try to use Postgres community tools to do it. Let's see if I had any other notes here. Yeah, this is one of the case in points. I'm wondering if by doing this, it's going to be a simple matter for me or any other database administration tasks that we have. If I want to move a subgraph from one database to another because maybe it's a big one or it takes up a lot of resources, I could just use Postgres tools rather than having to use GraphNode tools to try and move a subgraph around. So that is where that's what I hope to be doing in the next few months, is to get to this point where I can play with this. I think this is, these two are pretty much hand in hand. So see above, we're sharding, again, based on those subgraphs. So what I would, where my head is at though, as I learn more about our workloads going forward, is that I definitely hope to start doing, proactive monitoring on, okay, again, what are the heavy hitters? And do I have one subgraph that's just, beating the snot out of my Postgres instance? And should I maybe move other things off of there so that there's more resources for it? Or maybe this will warrant me setting up maybe a dedicated database for just this subgraph. I know that we're talking about like, dips and things like that in the future. So it might be something that you're looking at that and going, okay, yeah, I want to dedicate a shard to this particular subgraph. And that way you don't have the Citus cluster, it's like I forget the term for it right now, but like the conductor, the director node that everything goes through, it knows where to look. It just sends everything there. Okay, third question. I don't have a good answer right now. I really am trying to understand what are the patterns that we see at edge and node. I'm not even really thinking too hard about trying to optimize for a specific workload type. I'm trying more in terms right now to dial in just the basic settings that we talked about last time. Getting that foundation in shape with the PostgreSQL.conf and my reporting with things like PG Badger and all that, to have a better understanding of, okay, let's just tune the databases for whatever the heck it is that they're dealing with, rather than going, is it more of a read workload or more of a write workload? What's going on here? And also to maybe come up with tools like, some tables that maybe are updated constantly. They're all throughout the day, they're being updated and rows deleted and all that. And maybe do I need to create a cron job of some sort of scheduled job, any way you'd like to do it, that specifically vacuums that table every, 24 hours or week or something like that. Maybe even does like the heavy stuff like vacuum full, excuse me, which vacuum full, as a side note, I should share a link with you guys sometime. Robert Haas, one of the core committers, like from forever in Postgres, has a great blog article entitled "Vacuum Full Does Not Mean Vacuum But Better." So just because I mentioned vacuum full, and I don't want anybody to go running away with, I'm going to go vacuum full everything, because it can literally lock up your database if you do that. All right. So that's where I'm at on workloads at the moment. Okay, this one, pardon me, on caching strategies. So for me at this point, this was a bit of a head scratcher, because Postgres itself is doing caching of its own in terms of most recently used and dirty blocks that need to be written to disk or not, or buffer hits. It's like all this stuff that it's managing. So there isn't something with effective caching strategies from my perspective. I may learn something about how we do graph nodes later that changes that, but as far as I'm concerned, there's really not a caching strategy with Postgres that I'd be trying to use. It's simply some of the stuff we played with last time, like what is work mem, what are shared buffers, what's effective cache size, just simply telling it how much memory it has to work with. But I thought I heard in an earlier presentation from maybe a while back, I can't remember, Lutter mentioning something about how the graph node itself does caching. So I think he and or the rest of the developer crew might be able to answer this better than I can. And I think this was the last one, is the key metrics, and there's nothing under here. Performance for syncing. If that means syncing a blockchain, at this point, I can't answer that. I'm not even sure what I'm going to look at that. To determine if something is syncing well, air quotes around that. And with serving queries, this is one that, this is what stuff I was talking about last time. how do I determine if things, how is it serving queries? That's where it's that kind of continuous improvement type of thing that I'm using tools like, PG Badger to chew through the logs and find my problem child queries and see if I can do anything about them by adding indexes, or whatnot, maybe changing the work mem. If I've got things spilling over onto disk, could I increase my, again, the work mem might help with that, rather than writing the disk for temp files. And the general observations on like, wow, this thing's chewing up a lot of CPU or memory, or the storage is growing too quickly. This is the type of stuff that I'm going to be watching in the future. And as far as dashboards go, right now we've got our stuff running primarily in a managed service. So, something like AWS RDS or Google Cloud SQL or those kinds of things all have their own sets of dashboards. And I am just starting to go through and see what our SRE team over the last few years have developed in-house for their own use in Grafana, so that they can monitor things like CPU and query time, that kind of thing. But I guess the last point on this one is this is why I'm also very interested in starting to play with things like PG Monitor from that suite of tools that I mentioned last time from Crunchy Data, because that had, I think, Grafana dashboards put together already for Postgres. So I'd like to see what they're doing. But that's where I'm at on monitoring Postgres right now. It's I'll use the cloud service dashboard to see, are there any long running queries? Are there any vacuums that have been going on for hours? But what we need to start building now is more alerting around that, because I don't want to find it out by accident that I had an auto vacuum running for 20 hours. I want to know if that thing took 30 minutes even, maybe even less, but I'd like to know about that kind of stuff proactively. Yeah, and PG Analyze, that I have used that once. You know what? I mean, I wouldn't dissuade anybody from taking a look at it. It is a paid tool. I didn't love it because I came from the PG Badger crew, and also the PG Badger's free. But at the same time, this was quite a few years ago, and I was working as a contractor at the time, so I didn't have a direct ability to influence how we used it. So that might have added to my frustration. All right. So that wraps up round one of questions. Thanks for having me. You still around, Abel? You hear me?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, John. That was amazing. And I was kind of coming in and out, and I was having issues with hearing everything. So I'm not sure if we went through some of the questions in the chat. Did we get a chance to do that?
The only one, I didn't even hit a question. I just commented on the PG Analyze thing. That was the last thing I saw. So I didn't answer any questions if they were there. So here's one from Derek, wondering if anybody else has played with Citus.
Yeah.
Cool. Derek, you and I got to hang out, man. We got to.
Derek is a good dude.
DBAs, yeah. It doesn't matter what you were working with. We know each other.
That's amazing. We love that. IOH bringing people together. We love that. We love that. Okay, let's go through some of the questions that we have in the chat already. And we have the good fortune of having John here, so folks, like, fire away with all your questions. Payne seems to have missed last week's session and has come in, so I'm sure you have a bunch of questions, Payne, so fire away, and the rest of you as well. So let's as people are coming up with questions, let's go through some of the questions we already have. I guess let's start off with the one. We'll go. Let's see.
I see. Vince had one about starting sizes.
Yes.
I think that I think it's the first one.
You wanna go for that one?
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So Vince, like correct me if I'm not understanding it right, but you started up Postgres, which pool sizes look like for metadata, block cache shards. All right, pool sizes. So are we talking about the connection pooling that the graph node software itself does? Is that what we're talking about with pool sizes? Running hundreds on those as well
I
as a
believe so.
subject. Okay.
He did say yes in the chat.
Okay. So on the pooling, on the connection pooling, this is one that again, like I'm trying to find some time with David to talk about, like maybe if we want to make some changes going forward. So because my understanding so far is that because the graph node has connection pooling built into it, and there have been some attempts in the past to try to use things like PG Bouncer in between, and that for whatever reason that I have no idea why it didn't work out or it wasn't fitting well or something like that. All we've got right now is the setting in the graph node. Now, it seems, and I haven't gone through all of our settings, like at any given time to all of our shards, we'll have anywhere from like 400 to 800 open connections to a given database, a given instance of Postgres. And that causes me a lot of heartburn because all these Postgres instances have a max connections setting of 1,000. And I know that for a fact, even in the past, like if there have been problems with the number of connections in an emergency, it looks like we just cranked up the max connections to allow more things to try and connect. And as we talked about a little bit last time, more connections is not better. So what I'm trying to do is get us to a point where we are back to more of maybe a sane ratio of 2 or 3 times as many, the number of CPUs for max connections. Because when I see all of these things in the dashboards, out of those 400 connections, for example, 32 will not be in the idle, 30-ish will not be in the idle state. So in other words, those are all just open and doing nothing but consuming resources. Yeah, so that's where I'm headed with that. Now, David had shared something with me, and so don't take this as gospel because I may not have understood it correctly yet. Again, I need to get together with him, but it seems as though the graph node should be dropping unused connections, like it should be closing those off itself and keeping a lower number, but maybe it's not doing that. So it might need to be looked into, and it's early days on that. So that's where my head's at on. Oh, you too, Derek, I see. Yeah, there's just a ton of them, and they. Okay. Oh, Mickey's got more feedback. History here. Some queries were constantly getting killed because our high traffic nodes thought the shard was struggling. Okay. Interesting. All right. Oh, and Jim. Well, no, you've got active connections, so at least they're. Oh, well, active. I guess it depends on how that's reporting. Like the query behind that, like what does active connections mean in this context? Because yeah, like if you were to query PG stat activity and just do like a straight count on it, that's going to include like everything, including idle connections. So if you're not filtering that out, yeah, active connections, because the multiple states you can get in that table, idle are the ones that are just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, except chewing up probably around 14 to 16 megabytes worth of RAM each. So yeah, this is where it's going to be interesting for us as a community to work together. And it seems like, yeah, this is consistent. Everybody's got a lot of connections.
I guess my main question with the subgraph meta or splitting up metadata and block cache and then scaling horizontally with subgraph shards is where to in a limited resource world, not in a cloud environment, like where do I want to spend most of my time giving the horsepower to? The subgraph shards, the block cache shards, the metadata? Like what's going to benefit me most?
Okay, so I'll admit on the block cache side, there might be other people on this call that could answer that better than I can. Mostly I've been focused on the subgraph shards because they seem to be where the heavy workload is, where the heavy lifting is. So that's where I've been looking. But I definitely could stand to be corrected by those who are more experienced in this. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, Derek's comment about Citus. Yeah, I think that's I think that's where we're at for today. Okay, yeah, thanks, Derek. I'm learning here.
I mean, when you say low-hanging fruit, it really depends on what you're trying to optimize, right? Because we can optimize for thinking subgraphs faster, or to have really fresh data, or you can optimize it for faster reads. And so, each person's going to be a little bit different. Maybe your reads suck, but you're like super close to the chain head all the time, and the gateway prioritizes you because of how fast you are. Where someone else that might have a slower speed, but they're 60 blocks behind the chain head, they're kind of perceived as having stale data. So there's kind of like there's a little bit of this balance of like, you want to be fast, but you also want to be current. And so, in terms of like low hanging fruit, that's probably going to differ from person to person a bit. And what I would recommend is looking at the quality of service subgraph and just getting a sense of like, all right, how is my latency compared to others? Versus how is my chain head proximity compared to others? Like right now internally, we're noticing that we've got a fair number of subgraphs where we just fall behind the chain. And that could be a node related issue. It could be because we're just super over indexed, or for some reason our write speeds aren't as good, or whatever. But right now we're trying to optimize a little bit to be like, hey, let's make sure that we're in line with everyone else. And then we'll get back to some more improvements on read speeds and stuff like that. So it's a little tricky to just say like, a one trick pony for all indexers type of thing.
That's excellent. Thank you. One of the things that, and I'll just throw this out there as like, I've been upfront about, I'm still learning, that I'm curious about, are there situations where maybe you're just trying to keep this, you're just trying to write data really, really, really fast, but you don't care if it gets lost because you can recreate it. If there's a situation like that, you create a table with no logging, for example. So that's one way you could just speed up things insanely with your write, or turn off fsync. I mean, these are like more risky things, but boy, there are things you can make it right really quickly if you don't care if there's
so on
go ahead.
On that point, there's definitely times where we have that, right? Like when we're trying to sync a brand new subgraph that just got deployed, right? And maybe it's for an application that's been around for 4 or 5 years or whatever. And so you have to go through a whole bunch of the chain's history in order to compile all that data. And until you get to the chain head, you're not really expecting any reads. You're like, no one's going to query this, but I need to go and process all of this stuff. I'd be really curious to start looking at how can we expedite that initial sync. I know there's been some community efforts in looking into just-in-time querying or turning JIT off or JIT on, right? And having that be one thing. The other one that I've played a little bit with is turning off all indexes except for like your primary key and the ID field that would probably be referenced inside of the mappings. So turning all those off, syncing it to the chain head, and then rebuilding all those indexes. I think that could be a way to kind of speed things up. And ideally, like it'd be really cool to just have a trigger like on the subgraph deployment table to where it's, as soon as you change that status from or the synced column to true, then it just executes a script to go and rebuild all of your indexes, and then you're off to the races, right? Those are things that I'd like to play with, but one thing that I've had a lot of difficulty with is having good benchmarking, because ideally, and that's also something where you're like, hey, I need to find the time to go and do some of these things, but something as simple as just adding like a synced at timestamp, and there was a trigger just on subgraph deployment, so that way when synced equals true, you now log a timestamp for when it was, and then you can get an idea of like, all right, I started it on Monday, I synced it by Friday, let me drop the whole thing, resync it, but now with these parameters, and that could give you a better idea of some of the syncing benchmarking.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, this is exactly the kind of stuff I'm enjoying talking to everybody about, because there's a lot of ways to skin this cat. Well, for my part, that's what I've got for this week. I can't say yet or not if I'll be available for next time around, but definitely we'll do this again, and it might be next week. Again, wanted to throw out like the request to see if we can get we got an indexer software channel, I see, so maybe we could get an indexer database channel and start having more on the fly async chats about this kind of stuff. Whose palm do I have to grease? Elephant channel. Excellent. Yep. We'll definitely need an emoji for that channel. All right. Well, if 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀, you're working, it's back to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying my best to follow along with the conversation. I got bits of it, but yeah, appreciate your time, John. And it seems that we've answered many people's questions. So yeah, we've got another 10 minutes or so. And for the next couple of sessions, we're gonna do some more Postgres stuff. So we have a few specific actionable things that were suggested. So we're gonna explore some of those and yeah, come back with some new content there. So yeah, feel free to grab the POAP as Billy has posted here. And if you have any more Postgres questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and we can try and get those answered for you. But in the meantime, that is it for IOH today. We're gonna end a bit early, and wrap. So thank you so much, John. And oh, you have one thing? Yeah, sure. Fire away, Derek. Feel free to unmute if you want as well.
Yeah, I just popped it into the chat. So Jim and I played around with this account-like finder query that you can run against your database, and this is looking for tables where there's over 3 million records with at least 1,000 versions per entity, right? So you take a look at pools, and every time pools update, you get a new version of that one entity inside of your database. And those have been specifically beneficial to apply that account-like filter to. All in all, it had a pretty good improvement from what we've seen. Curious to know if anyone's going to be implementing this. If you want to send me, that might be a little bit lengthy, but if you want to send me the list of deployments, preferably as a distinct list, I'll kind of monitor some stats on your specific indexer across the quality of service subgraph, and we can just see, oh, what day did you apply it? What did your average latency start at? And what did it go to? And did it have a positive effect? And all that type of stuff. So feel free to give that a whirl and let me know any feedback.
Amazing. Well, you heard it there first. Feel free to share the feedback there with Derek. Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to the recording again on this one because my audio has been terrible throughout, unfortunately. I'll try and get that diagnosed and sorted for next week. But in the meantime, thank you all for attending today's IO8 session, and we look forward to having you again same time next week for some more exciting content. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.